This, my friends, is a sickness of the highest order.
Here it is, everyone. The Usurper for the worst superhero movie ever made. If you could call this a superhero movie. I don't know where to begin with how bad this movie is, or even where to start to piece together how such a travesty of a movie was even made. From the badly constructed plot, to the poor acting and characterization, to the terrible visual effects. Madam Web is by far the worst of the worst when it comes to superhero movies, which begs the question how this movie was able to make over $50 million. Madam Web stars Dakota Johnson as Cassandra Webb, a paramedic who lives in Queens, New York in the year 2003. She was orphaned because in 1973 her mother, a researcher specializing in spiders, is killed by her research partner Ezekiel because he wanted to harness a spider's rare healing properties. After a near-death experience, Cassandra discovers she has the power to see the future and keeps seeing 3 teenage girls being killed by a Spider-Man that's not a Spider-Man. So she decides to protect them. Meanwhile, Ezekiel, who has gained powers from the spider, is plagued by visions of the same 3 teenage girls who will one day become different versions of Spider-Woman, killing him in the future, and decides to kill the girls before they kill him. This movie is absolute garbage. For starters, Cassandra is a completely unlikable character. She's a paramedic whose job is to save lives, but she comes off as both ungrateful, rude, and bitter. Granted, Dakota Johnson does the best she can with the script she's given, but she alone can't save this movie. Sometimes she attempts to act, but most of the time her lines come off as if she doesn't want to be there. Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, and Celestia O'Connor are boring in this movie. Let's be honest. They're only in this movie because they look hot, which is a shame because all 3 actresses can act and are pretty good at it. Tara Rahim as Ezekiel is the blandest of bland supervillains with no motivation or backstory or intimidation. Oh, and most of his lines are dubbed over and he didn't bother syncing the words to his lips. That just goes to show how bad the script is. Everyone talks unnatural and cringe. And my god, this movie is the textbook example of telling rather than showing. There is not an ounce of nuance or the script allowing the viewer to figure things out for themselves. And dare I say, there was one line that got a chuckle out of me.
Don't get too excited.
The plot is staler than white bread without the crust. The connection between the 3 girls and Constance is that they are all orphaned in some shape or form, either from literally not having parents around or that their parents deliberately don't want to be around them. But that is a coincidence beyond coincidence, that 4 random women with no connection to each other prior would all have the same backstories. You never learn why Ezekiel wants superhuman powers from the spider. We never learn how the 3 teenage girls become Spider-Woman, which I should mention, the girls get their powers 10 years in the future, meaning we never get to see them use their powers in the movie. We never learn why the girls wanted to kill Ezekiel in the future. The whole movie is just the girls and Constance running away from Ezekiel and somehow managing to get away every single time. And that finale was completely underwhelming and unwatchable. Which brings me to the special effects. This movie was one of the worst unpolished visual effects and overuse of green screen I've ever seen. The unpolished effects were consistent, but they were the worst during the final act of the movie. If Disney Plus shows are a great example of the over-reliance on the volume stage, Madam Web is the prime example of Hollywood's over-reliance on post-production visual effects. Good luck trying to figure out what happened during the climax, except for Constance falling into the water, becoming paralyzed, and blind. The final nail in the coffin were the not so subtle references that this story takes place in a Spider-Man universe, as in Peter Parker does exist in this world. But here's the thing, there is no confirmation if this movie takes place in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Verse or in a completely different Spider-Verse. Let me explain. Constance's paramedic partner is Ben Parker, and Emma Roberts' character in the movie is Mary Parker, and Mary ends up giving birth to Peter at the end of the movie. But here's the catch, the movie teases the baby's name but never officially says Peter's name. Worse, there are no references on whether this world is a pre-established Spider-Verse or a completely new Spider-Verse. One could argue it's an original Spider-Verse because the 3 teenage girls are supposed to become different versions of Spider-Woman, which again I'll say, we don't get to see them with their powers. But if that is the case, then why spend all this time teasing the original Spider-Man? And that is the movie's final nail in the coffin, that it tries to use Spider-Man as a means to bring people in to watch the movie when clearly this is not a Spider-Man movie. It's not even a superhero movie. The fact that Sony hoped Madam Web will start a new franchise is bonkers, and honestly, I'm glad this movie failed. Now let's hope Kraven the Hunter is good. On that note, I'm Deviant, and thanks for watching.